Welcome to This Explainer. You know, there usually comes a moment in life when absolutely everything just seems to shake all at once. Those plans that once felt so incredibly certain, suddenly they become totally fragile. Your familiar relationships begin to shift. And honestly, the most unsettling part of all is that the person you've always believed yourself to be starts to feel, well, strangely unfamiliar. So today, we're going to explore why feeling like your life is completely falling apart might actually not be a bad thing. In fact, it might be the absolutely necessary beginning of your true psychological rebirth.
Imagine this for a second. You wake up one morning, you look at your job, your daily routines, your carefully laid out goals, and instead of feeling pride, you just feel this overwhelming, terrifying emptiness. The life you've spent years, maybe even decades building, suddenly feels like it belongs to an entirely different person. It's a profoundly jarring experience, right? It is a stark, terrifying reality to be plunged into a life that feels so deeply unfamiliar and just suddenly empty. You're not just having a bad day here, you are standing smack in the middle of an invisible psychological earthquake.
Now, when we experience this kind of deep emptiness, there is an incredible difference in how we frame it. If you tell society you're feeling this way, they're probably going to hand you some clinical pathologizing label. They'll tell you you're having a breakdown, a midlife crisis, or that you've simply lost your way. But the legendary Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, he observed this exact psychological pattern throughout his entire career, and he saw something completely different. He didn't see failure. He suggested that this chaos is an absolutely required stage of growth. It's the necessary moment when the soul enters a stage of profound transformation.
So, to really understand what's actually happening to you, we have to look at what Jung called the persona. For your entire life, you've essentially worn a psychological mask. And here's the kicker. This mask wasn't even necessarily built by you. It was built from the expectations of your family, the standards of your culture, and the specific forms of success that society constantly praises. Now, we all use this mask to function. It lets us integrate into the world, pay our bills, you know the drill. But if you cling to this mask for too long, you start living as a character in a play written by someone else. Eventually, life starts asking these deep, urgent questions that your mask simply can't answer. Your identity isn't falling apart because you're broken, it's falling apart because it's simply way too small for who you are about to become.
It really forces us to pause and just be brutally honest with ourselves. How many mornings lately have you woken up feeling like you're just playing a role, like an actor just hitting their marks on a stage? Are we exhausting all of our vital energy just trying to maintain a false image that doesn't even feel true to us anymore? If you feel like your life is dissolving beneath your feet, it is so vital to recognize the sheer amount of energy you're wasting just holding up a facade.
So why do we fight this change so hard? Well, Jung used a brilliantly vivid metaphor here. He noted that we fiercely resist this process because the old self, even with all of its severe limitations, still offers us this profound sense of safety. Clinging to an outdated identity is exactly like living in a familiar house that has begun to decay. Sure, the roof is leaking, the floorboards are completely rotting out, but you know every single corner of it. You understand how it works. Stepping outside of that decaying house into the total unknown is always going to bring severe discomfort, so we stay inside. We literally choose familiar misery over terrifying growth.
Let's slow down and really picture this viscerally. Think of a snake shedding its skin. During that transition, the old skin becomes incredibly tight, super dry, and it just doesn't fit the growing body inside of it anymore. Yet, when that skin begins to peel away, the snake doesn't just instantly emerge with a perfect, shiny new layer. No, there's this brief, highly vulnerable period where it is completely exposed to the elements. This transitional space is terrifying. It's raw, it's uncomfortable, and it leaves you feeling entirely unprotected from the world around you.
And that image brilliantly illustrates what Jung called the void. The void is this agonizing in-between space of deep self-doubt where the psychological earthquake feels the absolute most intense. It's a period of profound disorientation. The old you is gone, you can't go back to the way things were, but the new you, well, it hasn't fully formed yet. You are just suspended in the unknown. It is the ultimate test of endurance, just waiting in the dark for a new identity to take shape.
Now, here is where the crisis becomes truly challenging. Because when you're in the void, the light does not immediately appear. Instead, darker tones start to emerge. A hidden part of your psyche, known as the shadow, begins to rise up from the place where it has long been locked away. See, when the mask dies, all the things you suppress to maintain that mask come flooding out. We're talking about suppressed emotions, desires you never allowed to live, and the anger you silenced just so you could be seen as a good person. All of it begins to flood the conscious mind.
Jung compared this rising shadow to a layer of mud at the bottom of a lake. For a really long time, the surface of the lake might appear perfectly calm, crystal clear. But the very moment something touches the bottom, all that mud that has been settling there for years begins to stir, turning all the water completely cloudy. It feels like total chaos. But I really want to reassure you here, this cloudy chaos does not mean the lake has become worse. It simply means you have finally reached its absolute deepest layers. You're actually moving closer to your true self.
Now, think about the absolute irony of our modern wellness culture when you're actually going through something like this. When the tectonic plates of your soul start shifting and your entire identity collapses, what does society offer you? A $40 lavender bath bomb? A shiny new meditation app? A superficial reminder to just think positive? It's honestly almost comical. Jung would laugh at this. He knew that you absolutely do not cure a brutal, tectonic, structural collapse of the ego with a bubble bath.
Real transformation is not additive. Think about it. You cannot put clean water into a contaminated tank and expect it to stay clean, right? You can't just layer a new shiny habit over a rotting psychological foundation. You don't need a spa day. You need the absolute uncompromising courage to let your false identities die completely. You literally have to empty the tank entirely before it can be refilled with something real.
Okay, so how do we actually survive this collapse without being completely destroyed by it? How do we navigate such a profound crisis? Well, you must fundamentally change how you relate to fear and uncertainty. There are concrete psychological steps required here. Step 1. You have to learn to actively observe your fear rather than fight it or suppress it. And step 2, you must learn to endure what is known as sacred loneliness. Let's break these down.
Looking at step 1, Jung wrote that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's powerful. If you refuse to look at the sheer terror of losing your old mask, that fear doesn't just magically go away. It gets pushed deep, deep into the unconscious, where it will silently control your behavior. But the exact moment that fear is clearly named and observed, the moment you look straight at the terror and say, "I see you," it begins to lose its power over you.
And that naturally brings us to step 2, sacred loneliness. This is the crucial phase where the familiar expectations and the voices of your community slowly lose their absolute authority over you. The noise of the outer world finally fades away and you are left in deep solitude. Now, it can feel incredibly isolating, yes, but it is so necessary. This isn't just being alone. This is a sacred separation from the noise that built your false persona in the very first place.
In the absolute quiet of that sacred loneliness, urgent, foundational questions will finally have the space to rise up in the dark. Questions like, what do you truly want? Not what your parents want, not what your boss wants. What do you want? What actually makes you feel alive? And brutally, what in your life currently exists only because of habit, societal expectation, or just a paralyzing fear of change? Sitting in the dark forces us to finally confront these answers.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that time alone during an identity collapse is not some empty space that needs to be frantically filled with distractions. It's not a time to mindlessly scroll on your phone or numb out. Sacred loneliness is like a dark room where you can finally see your own light. It is a necessary sanctuary. Because without the darkness and the quiet, you simply cannot hear your own internal truth trying to speak to you.
This brings us to the ultimate test of our psychological sovereignty. We have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what is the one outdated identity, familiar role, or safe routine that is currently collapsing right now? What is the thing we are absolutely terrified to let go of? You have to look at it honestly, because acknowledging its death, naming the exact thing that is falling apart, is literally the very first step of your rebirth.
I really want to reassure you that overcoming an identity crisis does not mean somehow returning to perfect safety. Transformation rarely offers a clear map. Overcoming this crisis means facing your fear, honestly, and learning to keep walking even while the ground beneath your feet still trembles. Every single time you take a small step forward while your heart is still shaking, you are slowly, purposefully reconstructing yourself from the inside out.
Because, before the most radiant chapter of your life unfolds, life will quietly dismantle everything you once believed it was. That is the rebirth. Do not panic when paths that once felt certain become unclear. Jung believed that the journey of becoming who you are isn't about adding another layer to your life. No, it is the gradual falling away of masks. Life dismantles your old paths to forge a stronger you, finally revealing the authentic self that has always existed underneath.
Stop trying to force your life back to the exact way it was. Stop white-knuckling the decaying house of your old persona. The real question is, will you have the fierce, uncompromising courage to endure the void, integrate your shadow, and finally discover the magnificent reality of who you truly are? Embrace the collapse. Honestly, it just might be the best thing that ever happens to you.